Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull. Did you miss me? Anyway, I'm going to do what I normally do. I will do a meditation. Typically, the way I approach these videos is actually to not have an agenda or a script. And the reason for that is because I believe in our true nature, which is the name of my blog piece, is Our True Nature. I believe we have all the answers within us. That doesn't mean I don't go and do research, I do. But typically it's my inner feeling that guides my life, and that's why I've often said I'm inner directed. Everybody else is, but because we're so busy and we're very caught up unconsciously in patterns that drive our lives, we tend to put our own needs last. That's typically been the pattern. And a lot of the discord in our world, of course, is coming from unmet needs and wants. But as tempting as it is to continue on with that line of thought, I'm just going to show a few things. This is the central issue. And what I love about that is the mirror image in love. I often talk about the mirror. We are mirrors. We're mirrors of each other. What you see in another is in yourself. For me, love, as they say, is the answer. Many religions say that, and it is true. Although I could go probably deeper and say that love is who we are. It's not even an answer. It's not even a question. It just is what it is. Would be more accurate. So with that, I might just sit for a few moments, just become still, which is how everybody can access their inner world. If we do not go within, we go without, is a very wise statement that I read. So breathing in, breathing out, breathing in love, breathing out illusion, discord, negativity, breathing in happiness, breathing in peacefulness with life, breathing out all the fight. Breathing in your self-worth. Breathing out powerlessness. As you're watching this, I want you to also do it for you. Just breathe in and out. Just be still while you're watching this video. Just be still. Because you have your own answers. My answers are not your answers, they're my answers. I don't want you to follow me, I want you to follow you. First thing I want to show you is this beautiful flower. Look at that. I can put my hair. See the pattern? This is the Fibonacci. See how perfect nature is? Look at that. Let me get closer. Ah, there's the discord of humanity going past. I can hear a siren. This has actually got pollen on it. And in fact, I met somebody at Officeworks yesterday. This is not a plug for them, by the way. I just happened to be there. Photocopying about happiness, in actual fact. But the lady I met, I always chat with everyone. She has a daughter doing a PhD in pollen. And we had a discussion about the bees. I said, yes. I said, just make sure that your daughter comes to into an understanding that the imbalance within the natural system is actually to do with our own imbalance, in actual fact. And what I said to her was, if you look at the biotech companies, they're driven by the profit motive. They're not connected with the whole system through themselves. They're connected to the money system through themselves. But biotech companies are in it for the money. They don't understand the absolute sensitive and intricate connection of all species. This is a species system that we're part of. This is not just automated parts in a manufacturing process. We used to call it islands of automation in economics. You know, these little islands. And I would say industry is an island of automation or IT technology now, which only understands its own industry. In the Enlightenment periods, there were people who were trained in science, philosophy, poetry, the arts, politics. They typically had many disciplines that they were versed in. In the current time, yes, we might have people with multiple degrees, masters, PhDs, but typically we don't have an integrated knowledge. We typically have silos of knowledge. We don't know how to fully integrate the big picture. And if one's driven by a grant or some sort of monetary incentive, which would be the case in all research, that's going to determine the type of research you do. And it's got to have a benefit, an industrial benefit or a benefit of the one who's paying the money. It's not arising out of your curiosity. It's not arising out of your desire to serve humanity or your sense of social responsibility. This changes everything because intention is what creates what we see. And you know your own intention. You can market it as, you know, a community benefit. You can make yourself be seen to be corporate social responsibility. You can do that. You can put a lot of money into it and people can think you're great. But if you're looking at real outcomes, you have to be in alignment with true intent. So the woman who's doing the PhD in pollen is obviously choosing that subject, and I'm assuming from what her mother was saying, was she has a real desire to serve. But she will have to expand her knowledge into the human condition, which is creating the disruption to nature, why the bees are becoming, getting closer to extinction is probably the right wording. And of course the pollen is transferred by the bees, sticks to their feet. It's very amazing. Nature's put hairs on their little feet so they carry the pollen, and it's to pollinate other plants. It's actually masculine and feminine within the same plants. Some plants are masculine, some are feminine. Isn't it beautiful, the duality or the feminine masculine aspects in nature? That's why I've said in human condition we have both the feminine and the masculine in us. Obviously I've got higher estrogen, I'm feminine, I'm female. My chromosomes would have been XX, not XY. So I was naturally selected, you know, as a female, but within me is masculine as well. So we've got XXXY. I'm just thinking about the chromosomes. But all males have they always have an X, so the female is always within the male. That's why the feminine and the masculine. So I wonder how that works with the female that's got masculine in her. I guess that's genes passed on, because we have a historical record of genetics through our own lineage. So the masculine moves through the female in this lifetime, for example, from previous lifetimes. It's the way I see it. I could be wrong, but that's what is coming to me now. Nature's always working with the feminine and the masculine. But different from human society, nature, because it's all coded, instinctively is seeking equilibrium and balance. It instinctively is bringing the feminine and the masculine together in order to produce offspring. In order for life, biological life, to continue, those have to happen. But of course there are other organisms, single-celled amoeba, who are not, I'm assuming, feminine and masculine. A scientist could correct me, they're a biologist. But they have cell division. They divide. So early life divided, and then you could go back and say, well, what prompted the division of early life, that cellular life? What was the evolutionary jump from a single-celled amoeba? Did it come in through comets? When comets crashed on the planet, did they bring the amino acids that seeded life here on Earth? What was the intervention on this planet that brought forth life? What made the human species so different from the rest of the species in respect of this brain we have? We won't say it's the largest brain, because it's not. Elephants would have a bigger brain. Whales are highly intelligent, and dolphins. Not that intelligence is any purveyor of better than, it's not. It's just another feature of the composition of an organism. And the reason for that particular development would have been based on survival, not to make it the dominant species necessarily, although we would have to look at what that leap was from, the apes. Chimpanzees are our closest ancestor in actual fact. I think it's 99.7% of the DNA is the humans have. Very similar. And of course they have little fights amongst them, don't they? Little warring species. But we're actually, I like to think we have choices, but our imbalance is why we're warring with each other, because we've given preeminence to the masculine or the males in this species. But I do feel that's changing. The Me Too movement definitely is impacting, and it's not radical females getting out there going, we want a shot at the top job. It's not that. It's the feeling of subjugation that females have felt for a very long time, and they're getting desperate because the domestic violence issue, the unhappiness within men and women is, if you like, elevating as they're not feeling they've got control, and this creates that conflict. Women are also becoming more educated, and young girls, are starting to see themselves as equal, and hence the agitation for fairness. When you think you're not good enough, or you think that you're an inferior, or you think that you're only seen as a sexual object, which many have been, you are going to allow that discrimination to be present, or you won't even notice it. You'll just think it's normalised. But as our world is changing now, women are actually seeing themselves differently, and as a result the world changes, and that's the true order of things in actual fact. Whether you're a woman, whether you're someone from Africa, whoever you are, whether you're a gay person, or whether you're a person with a deformity or disability, what changes your world is when you change your world. It's when you decide that you're no longer less than someone else, and that's where the powerlessness is born. And that's how control operates. Control is not leadership. Control is not visionary. Control is to ensure A has power over B and that B does what A wants. And we've had historical lineages of power and control, which has been equated to social order. And it's not to say that didn't work. Fear did work. People did as they were told. Because if they didn't, certainly in feudal times, they offer you a head. So yes, fear has worked. That's why it had a bit of a life cycle. But in the present and current time, fear can no longer work because we're in danger of actually destroying our planet. We've got the nuclear payload to destroy it 4 times over. It's now, and these sort of assertions of, non-proliferation treaties and anti-ballistic missile treaties, or even looking at the Atomic Energy Commission, where they're seeking to control nuclear weapons development. I would say the genie's out of the bottle on that, because the genie was out of the bottle during the Second World War, which ended the Second World War. That was the beginning of the nuclear genie out of the bottle, when they dropped the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the US. That was when fissile material escaped, is the way I would word it. You can't control through fear. Others, as the chessboard changes, as people accumulate more resources, as we see the power dynamics shifting on the earth from what was originally sort of a power that is, I'm thinking unipolar and multipolar style of world, where you've got multiple points of power around the world. Initially, we had the US-Russian or USSR situation, where there was this dynamic which created a lot of Cold Wars throughout the world, or proxy wars they're called, where many people have died on the basis of an ideological flashpoint, where our way, the capitalist way, has been pushed as the economic generator of wealth, and then we're the socialist, communist, other side, which was initially that was the distribution of power socially, but it became more concentrated with elites, because wherever power and money go, we get concentration of wealth. When we get concentration of wealth, we get elitism. And it's because we believe our identity is attached to the very things that we've accumulated, the status that projects. If you're living in a very huge house, you've got your own little militia, your own little guards who protect you. You might have friends in high places. You would have friends in high places who protect you. You would move around the world with very expensive suits, with the best of everything. And inevitably that wealth gives you the impression that you're superior. Because I think inherent within every person, we know we're not. And there's sort of almost a cynicalness when that person looks out at others who haven't managed to achieve what they've achieved. There's a sense of that you must be, less than me on some level. But even within that, they know they're not. It's hard to explain in words, but I just sense that. And so this constant desire for power and money, it's an addiction. I've been contemplating greed, because I know that that's the seed. I can feel some poetry coming on there. It is. Greed. And of course, I'm not sitting here in a position of, I know better than you, that, I'm holier than thou. No, we've all reflected aspects of the very thing that's permeated the entire world, We've all had moments of greed. We've all had moments of control and power. You know, the question is where you want to orientate yourself towards. For me, I'm always working on becoming more clear, becoming in alignment with love, because I see love as the true power on the planet. I don't see it as a motherhood statement. I don't see it as an idealistic notion. I see it as the very building blocks of a stable life inherent within childhood. If you have very loving people around you, you will mirror that into the world. Whatever you've been influenced by in your childhood will manifest your life one way or another. So when we talk class systems, they come up through a class which sees itself in a certain way. It gets access to better education typically because more money goes into it. Teachers will attract to it. And so that class system becomes a mateship system, becomes, you know, a filial type system of resonance where, oh, you went to that grammar, oh, I went to that grammar, or, you know, such and such. There's a club around that whole class idea that one is educated to rule. And it's an unfortunate sort of division in our society which renders the rest of the people who go to the public education system as somehow less educated, somehow less worthy, somehow unable to reach those heights, although they do. There's certainly evidence that they do. But let's just say that there's impressions generated through class. So again, that was really much connecting back, way back to the various material wealth, how that projects out into the world. And I was originally starting that line of thought from the seed of greed, which is where I want to come back to now. Because I see it as a mental dysfunction in actual fact, I do. And that's with great respect to all those who have really been hooked on money. It's not unlike heroin, it's the same thing. It's a mainlining, it is. It distorts the way you see and think because everything becomes translated through the balance sheet. It doesn't become translated through your own sense of conscience or your own sense of what's right or how another's going to be impacted by your decision. Those things get minimised because they're not important. They're seen as distractions from a professionalism that looks out on the world and makes business decisions in order to benefit shareholders. See, you can see the line of thought. It disconnects. It goes, no, that's not professional. I'm just going to sit with it for a sec. I see it spreading like seeds around the world immediately. Capitalism. Capitalism is a great pusher of it. It's a pusher. And of course, it's a successful pusher of it too, because people go, wow, I can make money, you know, and there's a certain sense of freedom around that. You know, I can go to this business, I can go to that one, just got to pay tax. Off we go. And it's got a competitive nature to it, which is the sports. I want to win, and this is the ego. I'm better than you. It's fun. Yeah, I'm going to read you something in a moment, but I'm just feeling not to go there right now. Just stay with this. Competition. This is a male game. Women compete too, and we see that in sports, but it's predominantly a male disposition that women have just sort of cleaved onto. Women typically aren't. We're more gregarious. We're more group-oriented. We like to dance and sing. Haven't you noticed that at nightclubs? The women all get on the dance floor. We're creatives. That's why we dance. We really feel. We tap into the true nature very quickly. We feel it. We're feelers. We're fearless at times. Yeah, we're just caught up in the illusion of the conflict, it's funny I said conflict then, competition. It is conflict as well. It's modelled on warfare. I did strategic planning at university. You know, I remember looking into the Japanese Chiobels. I'm going back in knowledge now. This was quite a few years ago. This is at the beginning of all of this. My economics background actually started at the beginning of these really big multinationals really starting to strategize far more. So Chiobels in Korea, in actual fact, Karetsu, I think it was, in Japan, from memory. These are very big, very large companies. So what they do, it's not just these Asian ones. The US have large multinational companies. They don't call them that. They're multinational companies. Typically, they have global strategies where they might well procure resources from different parts of the world. So they're global players. They don't see themselves based in nation states. They might purchase a few politicians, which we've noticed. And that's a real concern for the mainstream, the civil society, because it loses its voice when people get disproportionate influence because of the argument of GDP, which is gross domestic product, meaning that they are contributing to jobs. This is the way it plays out politically. And jobs means social stability in respect of, having an order to your society. These are the guys and women, predominantly males, who are doing it. So they're employing, but nowadays we're finding they're going offshore and they're getting the cheapest labour because they see it as a cost of production. They don't see social policy, social cohesion, optimisation of one's own life, really drawing upon the potentials inherent within humanity. What they do is they see them as widgets, essentially. That's the objectivisation of labour. This is why there's the tension and the union movement growing up around that, because of the abuses that happened to people because they were seen as widgets. And they were controlled because they were paid. They were not paid to have an opinion. They never saw themselves as democratic because they were a hierarchical type organisation. And I'm just flipping here laterally to the tribal societies. Certainly in Australia, the Indigenous, I heard, were more flattened in the sense of they were a more sitting around a table type society. Let me analyse that better. They didn't have tables. They would have been sitting on the ground around the campfire. There certainly would have been notable people within the tribal community, but essentially they saw themselves as equal. There's a real difference. It's not a hierarchical, top-down system of command and control that we see inherent within, particularly Western, although it's in other cultures as well. I'm seeing China with its very complicated social system. Whenever you have royalty, that elitism is anchored because the royalty see themselves as the rulers. They see themselves in a predominantly superior position. They see themselves as well-bred. They're careful who they breed with. There is breeding aspect to the way they think because they're trying to keep their pedigree. They have an air of refinement, culture, leadership. And that culture only associates with that culture. It doesn't necessarily mix. It might be seen to mix, but it doesn't necessarily mix. Although that silo, is the way I'd call it, is changing. As we get a bit more progressive and the younger ones come up, they are much more open to mixing it up. There's still the military lines, though, that are very strongly and powerfully embedded within the royal structures because what maintained their wealth was military. So they are hand in hand. Without that military, they have no power. Their power is inherent within association with the military and giving that military some form of justification for protection of the people who they see themselves reigning over. And the kings, Magna Carta comes to my mind, kings of England, they got out of hand, and the barons and various others came together to water down that power through the Magna Carta, so rights were born. This has happened around the world when people have risen up against totalitarian power structures. This is why we tried to create secular states, keep religion out of states, out of politics, because they tend to have very, very strong worldviews that they then impose on others. We saw that through the religious wars. Crusades comes to my mind, where this thought of, if you're not religious, you're not one of us, therefore you're worthless and you'll be attacked, or you have to convert to us. This has within it, this is the power of religion. It's got nothing to do with spiritual or inner power, which is all about love. I simply say to those who engage in religion, if you're operating out of a power structure of power over others in righteousness, and that righteousness can be expressed in any form of ideology, it doesn't have to be religious. It's a righteousness, I am right, you are wrong. This is division. I'm superior, I know better, you don't. You don't have a right to sit at this table. You haven't earned it. That's a perspective. So righteousness infiltrates very subtly, and it comes in through narratives that can be very clever, but there's always an intonation of undermining of that other, dividing on some line. When I see that division, I know it's coming from power, not love. I'm feeling inspired very strongly around love right now. I could feel tears I could feel the word love coming up, because I know the power of it. I know the beauty of it. I know the total equality of it. It's a tone. I call it an equality tone. And what it is we see ourselves in each other. I'm not better than you. You are not better than me. We're just diverse. Love inspires that type of thinking. Everyone is my family. When I travelled the world, I saw every country as mine. They were my people. Everywhere. I don't care if they're Muslim. I don't care if they're Hindu. I don't care if they're Buddhist. I don't care if they're atheist. They're all my people. This is what love inspires one to see. When I clowned on the streets of all these countries, 20 countries, I saw the other as myself. And when I danced with them, I was dancing with my family. In the hospitals, on the streets. You know, Patch Adams comes into my mind right now because I saw his movie again today, and I know I've diverged from the grid thing, but let's just leave that for the moment. Patch Adams, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. Really, really wonderful. I'm so blessed that I had the privilege of spending 2 weeks with him in Russia. I'm really glad I found him, and I only found him because I was Googling. What was I doing? I was Googling peace, I think. I found Helen Caldicott that way too. I'm just trying to think how I actually found him. I'm sure I saw his movie. I got inspired to become a clown when I saw a woman, Patricia Cameron Hill and Shane Yates. They're a Victorian couple, a doctor and a nurse, that were in hospitals, and they were inspiring, healing through humour. They had a book, Dr. I Feel Funny. I like that. And of course I started up clown rounds at Canberra Hospital, and we had Wally the Jolly Trolley. I had a few, hands that I'd tap on someone's shoulder. And I had my whoopee cushion. I used to lean up against the lift and let it go. I go, ooh, beans. Yes, I know it's very naughty, but that's the way we are. When we're clowns, we do lots of silly things. And, you're just getting people to laugh. And when I was watching Patch Adams, it was just really great. I know not all the movie is true, but it's a great film. And I really love what he did, how he tried to create a free hospital. Now, this obviously this is not a capitalist notion. He's saying healthcare should be free for everyone. He treats the whole person, not the disease, which others will call dis-ease. Inner discord creates, in my view, disease. I'm just thinking about traveling through countries. You can pick up microbes and bacteria, so it's part of one's life journey. For whatever the reason, you can have an experience of sickness. I certainly got sick when I was in India from water. So going back to Patch, his whole purpose was to treat the whole person. So when they come in, he's not just going, have you got a broken arm? He'll ask them about their lives. He'll address the pain first, of course, but he's interested in the whole person, which the medical fraternity are not. They dissect the disease like they would a Descartes type logic. So they break it down into its infinite parts, because logic, the left brain, analyzes through reductionism. When you're coming from a love perspective, you see the wholeness. It's actually a wholeness. There's no left, right, or anything in any of this. This work that I'm sharing, or this narrative that I'm sharing with you, is more to do with our innate, instinctive aspects. It's got nothing to do with ideological anything. So when I talk a love-based philosophy, I am not coming from a political spectrum at all. I'm coming from a lived experience of love in action. And that's a very different reality. So going back to what Patch was trying to do was welcoming everyone, so people weren't excluded, they don't feel rejected. Social isolation, which is what we're learning in Australia right now, is the absolute epicenter of social isolation. Now, where we exclude on the basis of various characteristics, this is discrimination. Jane Elliott's work is noteworthy. When you're coming in through a love-based perspective, you won't discriminate against anybody because you will invite diversity. You won't say, he's an Indian, this one's an Arab, that one's a Buddhist, and then decide who you like. When you come from a love-based perspective, you say, okay, well, that's your quality of life experience. You're having an experience for whatever reason. I don't know. You're having the experience as an African, Sudanese, Southern Sudanese. You've come from conflict. That's been your story. That's been your experience. And with that, you see the world in another way because you've been shaped by it. This is why we often clash it up, and people mistakenly believe you should think like me. Well, no one should think like you because they haven't been through your journey. Someone could come from South Africa and have a completely different life experience. From that point of view, they may see people in a certain way, depending on whether they were, African or whether they were tribal Africans, with the various tribes around that whole continent who are not the same people. Similarly to India, we call them all Indias on as if it's a lump sum. No, there's loads of differences and tribes. Same with China. They're not all the one people. They've got different languages. They've got, like the Indigenous culture here in Australia, I believe there were certainly minimum of 500 languages. I've certainly heard up to 2,000 languages. That's diversity because they were located in a certain local area. And culture develops around association. Culture develops around the physical environment and how that changes you. You might be near a mountain. You might be by the sea. You might fish. You might be in the desert. All these different environments are going to shape you and your culture as you adapt, which is your instinct to survive. It's programmed in. So going back to Patch Adams, he sees everyone as equal as well. I've realised that he and I are very alike, and I didn't know that when I was first inspired to write to him. I only wrote to him because he was a clown and he seemed to be into peace. I had no idea of his politics, had no idea of, what he was about. I didn't think about Russia because in Australia we don't care about the US-Russian conflict. Yes, we're allies of the US, but we don't hold these very, very passionate viewpoints in a Cold War narrative because we're not part of it. So when I go to Russia, it's like, I'm just going to Russia to go clowning on the streets. How much fun is that? It would be the same as going to Thailand for me. You know, it's like, it's just another country. We're travellers, you know, a lot of Australians. So Patch had this beautiful universal viewpoint, which I've come to learn more about over time. And one of the things that he said at the end of the movie, which really hit me, was when he took on the university establishment, which he did, who were running the medical program that he was going to get kicked out of because of excessive happiness, because he was clowning around. They were trying to get him to work through the system. He was supposed to conform and do as he was told. You're supposed to be a doctor. You're supposed to, you know, there's a status. And that came up in the film with some of the student colleagues, you know, who wanted to be doctors, wanted to wear the coat and, you know, have the status. Whereas Patch, in actual fact, in the movie, he's in a mental institution where he meets that very famous man. I don't know what his name was now. He donated the land to Patch, which enabled the free hospital. But he really looked at the doctor who was assessing him, who didn't even hear him. You know, he made some funny lines in the film, which I'm sure Patch would have done in real life, to see if the doctor was listening, and he wasn't. He wasn't interested at all. So he had his first experience of indifference. And when I saw the film, I laughed and I realised that that was exactly where my conflict line had been. Indifference to suffering. I have definitely taken exception to those who are indifferent to the suffering of others. It doesn't mean I dislike them. I don't. You know, I've known quite a few people in this category who really just don't care. I've seen it more in the professional classes, and it's to do around professionalism, where they disconnect from the emotions which they see as sort of irrational. Emotions are seen as irrational. And this is where we're having all the problems in respect of social welfare, where these things are being seen as widgets. We're going back to the widget mentality of compliance, where people are treated like numbers. They've got to fit boxes. They've got to do as they're told, and they lose their rights. This is a Descartes reductionist simplification of a very complex society with very complex social needs, which is what I started this discussion with, was unmet needs. So applying a scientific paradigm over a social issue is very, very problematic, and it's very, very destructive of mental health. This is what I've learned. Patch Adams was trying to convey to the hierarchy in the university system, who saw themselves as privileged, who were not open to very diverse views. Now, someone acting as a clown, obviously they're going to see them as silly. They're going to see them as diminishing a very serious science, bringing down the profession. You know, the statement in his file of excessive happiness was seen as something wrong with him, rather than incredibly important aspect of healing, in actual fact, is happiness. Our society has had a structure placed upon it, economically speaking, that is a scientific, mechanistic type structure that is creating unhappiness, because it's becoming too onerous, it's becoming too controlling, it's becoming less responsive to the unmet needs of people. Their emotional feeling state is not irrational. It senses its environment. It is actually part of the survival mechanism of the human being in actual fact. When I sense people, I am sensing if they're looking upset or angry, and I adjust, I adapt in accordance with that signal. This is a natural signal when I'm not plugged in with my iPhone, which I'm not. I don't plug in like that, although I do at libraries because I am actually focusing. But when I'm out in society, I don't, because I'm not going to screen out my world. I'm not going to isolate them socially isolate them, and I'm certainly not going to ignore them. I smile at people, I notice them as I walk past because I care. Being a clown, I've moved through the public and I've connected with everyone. And it's the most extraordinary feeling of wholeness. I felt completely in love when I had this experience, recognizing that my well-being was very much connected to my social connectedness in society. The mental health stuff we're seeing in our society is all related to disconnection. It's related to objectivization, where you see an object, a box. You cannot feel that other, and it's come down to how you've been programmed. This is the IT problem that we're facing, the 21st century education, which I've mentioned on my blog before. That's come out of the Clinton era, which has come from industry, which is seeking to bring online education as a means of, they're talking about personalisation, tailoring it, that this is what the young people want. Well, it's not. The young people are plugging into the computers because they're very curious, they're very active minds, but their parents are absent. Their families are breaking down. So they're seeking refuge into computers. They're trying to get knowledgeable, so they're going off and searching in all directions. But it's an intrusive technology when it's all interconnected, because others can watch what your child's doing. Monitoring. We do not want an Orwellian type scenario arising up out of excessive monitoring and calling that monitoring rather than surveillance or control paradigms. We do not want the control paradigms projected through IT technology. It's already happened around the world, as we've seen with disclosures on international levels with Snowden and Assange, talking about the mass surveillance of civilians. This is a massive issue of our time, and it's not respecting the privacy and personal life of each individual, which is a need. I don't want my life surveilled. I'm speaking openly because love is actually moving me to speak the truth as I see it. I'm claiming my democracy is what I'm doing, and my humanity. In a democracy, it should be absolutely permissible for anybody to say anything, providing, I'm always put the proviso of do no harm. And that's a conflict resolution term. We're not here to hurt one another. But whether you like it or not, you're living in diversity and voices will rise, particularly when they note things that they feel are not in the best interests of children. This is Children's Week here in Melbourne. We've got to put their needs far, far beyond our own. They come first. The children come first. And that's why I created Worldpeacefull. That's why I do these videos. That's why I speak up, because I put children first. And this is not a motherhood thing. I'm not a mother. I put them first because they're vulnerable. They're open to being, influenced. The technology can affect and impact the wiring of the brain because of where they focus. If they're not used to relational empathy, awareness of community around them, if they tune it out, then they become siloed and they become isolated. Mental health issues will arise for them for sure, and you'll find anxiety. They get socially anxious because they don't know how to connect, and they need to. To procreate, you've got to feel a connection with someone to want to go forward. Otherwise, it's not healthy. The domestic violence, the issues of rape are all coming from objectivization, where the one party has a need, taking that need out on another party and not feeling how that other might feel. That's a dysfunction. It's not natural for human beings to not care about other humans. We can train it out of them and we can call it defense, but our true nature is to care and feel for one another. And I know there are many soldiers who do and are having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because they've done actions that are not in alignment with their true nature. It's against their nature. And they suffer terribly, the guilt of hurting someone they don't even know. So when I'm raising these issues about empathy or the disconnection from fellow human beings, which is a dehumanization of the human condition, we're setting up for ourselves a future society completely disconnected, that a society quite pathological, unable to connect to the great beauty within itself, which is its right. It is a divine right in truth. The love energy that I've talked about in this video is absolutely the foundation of human stability. People can write it off and say it's a female thing. It's not. Men feel love for their partners. They're people that they work with. Men are starting to connect with that love narrative and say, I love you, to a mate. This is a good news. We need fathers to look to their sons and say, I love you. I'm proud of you. I don't care if you don't become top of your profession. The only thing I want for you is your happiness, and I'm here for you as your father. It's called unconditional love, and that's what the boys need. And what they've failed to get is that, which is why they're going out trying to impress their fathers, who are often absent because they're either watching TV or they're disconnected. This is an absolute dysfunctional problem in our society. We've got a corporate sector who are running very busy. Rather than creating the leisure society which technology was envisaged to do, it became the opposite, where we sped everything up. This speeding it up created more stress. This is where cancer is coming from, is the stress, the pollutants, the imbalance with our nature. This is what's creating all these problems in families breaking down, in road rage, quick grabs of news, and that becomes our worldview. This is not analysis. This is not deeply sitting with events that are going on around the world. This is not understanding the refugee flows, the incarceration of people on islands like Manus and Nauru here in Australia, in hospital, inhumane conditions, which is more reflective of that mechanistic compliance type mechanism applied over a social area, which requires compassion, which requires decisiveness, which requires assistance immediately. Now, when you come into full alignment with your humanity, you will respond very fast. If you don't respond fast, you're disconnected based on a thought that you think, I don't need to answer that, it's not in my interest. This is selfishness. Selfishness is it's all about me, I don't care about you. Community is we are each other's keepers. That's come out of Christian mythology. Jeshua, Jesus, he actually said that. We are each other's keepers. In those days it would have been brothers, but he meant brothers and sisters. That means my society and my family, I care about them. But if I disconnect and go, you know what, go eat cake, I don't care about you, you're not in my, and that's what indifference does. And going back to Patch, that's what he was raising in the minds of the students and the academics, was the damage of indifference, not seeing the patient, not knowing their name, not caring for how they might feel. In fact, Patch, he would look at the nurses and he would see how they were interacting with the patients. Gandhi also was a person who observed the women, because he was also dealing with the same indifference when he was dealing with the British. This idea of superiority, this obedience, because in Gandhi's South Africa, I believe, the Indians or the blacks used to have to crawl on the ground if a British person was nearby. They would have to crawl on their hands and knees. This is a fact. They were not allowed to walk on the footpaths because they were not good enough. This is what discrimination in its extreme creates. These were the indentured labourers in South Africa who were very cheap. So we're seeing the same thing play out with cheap labour being brought into countries. The human trafficking, I've just posted overnight a human trafficking issue in the US where Mexicans were brought in and given debts so that they would work as slaves. So we've still got slavery. Lincoln didn't end slavery, sadly, because of the greed, which was the impulse for some of this video. So going back to Gandhi, he observed the women and he saw that non-violently they went around the men. Because we're not going to fight you. I mean, some young women might think that they can, but they can't. Physically, we don't have equal strength. This is why things like respect have been put out there, is because we can't. This is a primitive response if a person beats up a woman or a woman beats up a child. You know, I'm quite happy to look at it from all angles. I'm not for violence on any level. We've got to learn how to communicate what our problems are. You don't stonewall people. You sit down and you talk to them. You know, and a lot of people in our society are ignoring issues, not facing them head on. It's very bad for mental health. So going back to Gandhi, he watched the women go around situations. Women tend to talk. We'll communicate. As you can see, I'm very good at this. It's innate. I have a capacity to communicate. So again, connecting Patch and Gandhi, this is lateral. The core issue there was the observation of the feminine in dealing with human need, in dealing with social welfare, the welfare of the people women are good at, because we sense it, we feel it, because we've not been shut down emotionally. So what he was trying to say to the indifference he confronted in this elitist profession, of which many good doctors emanate, he was trying to remind them of their humanity, to bring laughter into healing, because it actually boosts the immune system. Laughter is incredibly powerful for healing. There are various hormones that are expressed when a person laughs, endorphins. It has a biofeedback. It has amazingly powerful healing ability because the person wants to live. This is why laughter is used. So when Patch was making his speech to this board, this appeals board, at least he had an appeal, he was trying to send the message to them to not disconnect humanity, because that actually is what prevents the healing from happening. He had a profound love for the whole human. I met him. I spent time with him. I saw him cry over an orphan child who I actually filmed. He was with this child, interacting with her in a Russian, or at the time, it was Russian orphanage. Little girl was deaf and dumb, and he was pulling out his earplugs and he was going, "Oh, look at that. Ooh." I'm going into clown mode now. You know, he had his nose, and it was just so beautiful to watch him with the child. But he knew these children were threatened in this orphanage because there was mafia coming in. I interviewed some of the clowns who had met some of the women who had been exploited and raped by these dark criminal gangs coming into the orphanages to get the women. So this is prostitution. The dark side is what we saw as well. And I know Patch would have known a lot more than what we knew. And I saw him crying on the bus looking at a photo because he felt for this child and where she was going. This is humanity. He talked about the love revolution, which is on my website. You can have a look at it, which is the many having a say, not the few dictating to the many. And this is, he calls it revolution, I call it evolution. And because I have a oneness philosophy, I see us all as connected. I don't see an us and them. Whilst I'm illustrating what I've seen as mistakes made in the way that we've all been taught, grouping us into classes, disempowering people through force and control, rather than eliciting dialogue Learning equality. I often talk about King Arthur, the Round Table. The purpose of that metaphor is to say we're all equal at the same table, and can we sit and listen? Because until you do, you will not have national security. You will not have social order. I mean that not as an ideological perspective. This is coming from the human condition. People need to feel heard. They need to be respected. This can't just be words used to be seen to be. You have to learn respect. That means respect yourself. Rather than accumulating all these negative things that you've done over your life and putting them into a compartment, compartmentalized thinking, ignoring it, you have to integrate thought. The only way you can do that integration is through the emotions. You have to feel this hurt that you've had, because all men feel hurt. When they're children, they've cried a lot, or they've been told to be silent. They've suffered a lot through a patriarchal system which has affected them. And then they've taken on that model and believed it's truth. It's not. There's a very wise saying that I just read recently from a very high source, which says, no one does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. That can be very hard to accept, but if you listen to the words, no one does anything inappropriate given their model. We can call that role model. We can call that ideological model. We can call it religious model. We can call it communist model, Buddhist model, whatever it is. It's a model that's configured, and that model, that education is how they see. They see through the prism. Now, in my work, I've talked about real hope, responsibility, empathy, awareness, love, honesty, oneness, peace, enjoyment, and service, real hopes. That's the model. That's my model. It means rather than Descartes type reductionist thinking, analytical, break it down, I'm looking through values, universal values. This is the rehumanization of humanity. So responsibility means I have the ability to respond. I can do something. That response might be writing something. It might be poetry. It might be this video. Empathy, pardon me. Empathy means to stand in another's shoes, to feel their feelings. What is it like to be that other? So when I've had those come around me, I will naturally imagine I'm them. If I was that other, how would I be feeling and thinking? That then enables me to join with them a little bit, try to get a sense of where they're coming from, because that's why I don't see anyone as an enemy. I see everybody as friends, potential friends. If we're able to make that step across that threshold into the unknown, which is to question your own thinking, that's the threshold. When you think you're right, you won't want to go there because it makes you feel like uncertain, because you might be wrong. And if you're wrong, your whole identity's been built on being right. Well, I'm here to offer you the idea here that it's okay to be wrong, and you often are, and so am I. So let's get that out of the way. We're human. We make mistakes. Our arrogance is what holds us in positions of power, unwilling to make that step, because that other is beneath me. That other is not in my interest. I feel indifferent. I don't care. That person's threatening. I could be taken down, whatever. Is that true? Byron Katie comes to mind. You question your thinking. Is it true, or is it an opportunity for you to step over the threshold into something better, more powerful, real power? The real power is to know thyself, which I've written in poetry many times, and it's true. So we've got empathy, awareness. Awareness is a simple noticing. When I do the stillness, I'm going into awareness. This whole narrative has been awareness because I'm not planning it. I'm allowing it. Then I'm seeing the interconnections from the very beginning to the very end, because it's coming through the prism of real hopes. This is what your being gifted with is I'm demonstrating universal values in action and how we see and how it connects and how it becomes holistic. It's not just silos of information where you get caught up in your own world and then you wonder when it all comes crashing down because you hooked your identity to it. You became addicted to the money that it generated, but it's not you. They're just addictions. They're illusions. Empathy, awareness, love. As I said before, it's like the mirror. Love is the root of humanity. It's sharing, caring, revealing, and healing. This is why the mental health stuff is all about dialogue. It's all about therapeutic intervention. It's not about coercive bullying. If you want mental health, you have to demonstrate respect and listen to those voices who you have discarded or you've considered them vulnerable, unable to fight back, and that's the bully in you coming out to destroy that other. You have to think about that and feel about that. Is that who you want to become? Because it only takes you down a trajectory where you will come undone for sure. Because the whole bullying narrative is a very weak. And I mean it, I have no disrespect in when I describe these things. This is from a teaching perspective. It's very weak. It's powerlessness seeking power. It's a weakened state. But it looks powerful because it has its various mechanisms to ensure that other stays powerless. But you can have nothing and still have power. I have nothing myself. I have no money, nothing. But I don't feel powerless anymore because I love who I am and who I'm becoming. My allegiance is to love, in actual fact, which is the root core of who we are. That's why when we make babies, we're coming together through love. That unity that's felt in those moments of total love for that other is who you really are. And even if that situation was not loving, when you look into the eyes of that beautiful baby, let's say that will awaken a humanity within you, which is the love in you. The humanity in you is the love in you. When we claim our humanity, we're claiming love, which is our human condition. Honesty. So real hope, responsibility, empathy, awareness, love, honesty. Very important. I talk a lot about the truth will set you free. I mean it. This is not an ideological anything. This is a universal value, truth. It's not a learned truth through book learning, although philosophers grapple for the truth in their ponderings, in their writings, and we might read something and say that is profound, and then we cry. A truth within ourselves has been touched because we know the answers. We all know. That's why we're not unequal. The answers are within. That's how you know and you feel it. That's why you go off in your various directions, because something within you has been evoked. So truth. Gandhi talked a lot about truth. He saw God as truth, truth as God. You can call it ecosystem. You can call it life force energy. Call it whatever you want. It's been here long before we existed. I can state facts and say I look out the window and I see a leaf, but is that true? Byron Katie comes to me. Well, is it true that it's a leaf? Well, we've called it a leaf. We've labelled it a leaf. Is it a leaf? Given its label, well, no, it's not. So is it true it's a leaf? Well, no, it's not. It's actually part of a branch. And then we go further. This might sound like reductionist thinking. The tree, the seed. Can you be absolutely sure it's a leaf? How do you feel? How do you react when you believe it's a leaf? I see it as separate from the tree, right? Or are you able to look at the tree without a story of a leaf? Turn it around. It's not a leaf. You know, maybe I'm a leaf of a tree. You know, I don't know. Turn it around, turn it around, turn it around. That's what the work is all about. It's about testing the various unquestioned thoughts that we've had, which have locked us into combat. They've locked us into bullying. They've locked us into righteousness. The unquestioned mind is the mind that's ripe for control, and we don't want that. We want harmony. is the evolutionary step to where we're going. We're going into harmony, which is not social control. Control is a negative, fear-based paradigm. Harmony is a unity-based resonance field where we're actually harmonizing on the basis of being tuned in to it all, which we're all very electromagnetically we're emitters is the word I'm trying to find here, of that frequency. We're all in different frequencies in the sense of the more negative you are, the lower your frequency. The higher your frequency is, the more love-based. And that's why someone who's very depressed with someone who's very high, very happy, is going to find that person very irritating to their frequency because they're not able to jump to that high happiness. That's why when people go, be happy, smile. And then others, I know Hugh Mackay, who was a social researcher here in Australia, he was not for the whole happiness thing because he saw it as a pretense. And I get that as well. It's not about just make us all happy and smile because we don't feel good when you don't smile. Well, I don't agree with that. I think, be who you are. And if you feel bad, you feel bad. If you feel great, you feel great. But don't fake it until you make it. You can, though, reach for the next highest feeling. And this is a law of attraction type philosophy, which is, I'm very depressed. Let's go for what they do is they work you up. It's not anyone working you up. It's just more a scale of emotions that one works through. And you might go to anger, envy, you might go to, let's say, kindness or, I don't know, empathy. Love is the top one. I can't quite remember how all the emotions work, but it works its way up. You just go one step at a time. You start to feel a bit better and you feel a bit better. Now, when you feel really good, that's when you come into alignment with your true nature. So it's the harmony that I'm talking about is aligning with true nature, not a pretense of happiness. Let's all go skipping around collecting flowers. When I'm a clown, I'm in harmony. I'm not actually pretending the happiness I feel. I'm happy, then I go out and clown with people. I have attempted to clown when I've been very down. I've done it once, and I had to make a decision, and then I saw happiness as a decision as well, which was a very powerful moment because as soon as I put my clown suit on, I started to feel my energy lift. And that was with a whole bunch of principals. I remember I was at a conference, and I clowned for 3 hours, totally happy. And then when I came back and took off the clown suit, I cried. That was pretty remarkable moment. So I've covered a huge amount of territory, and I guess with this video, I kind of wanted to bring the whole philosophy together in this moving narrative so you could go back over it. I've allowed the information to just come and flow naturally so that you can take it in. But as it's a lot, I know, but I'm covering it in a holistic fashion. And I hope it's of great benefit to you. I'm just going to grab one of my cards because I'm going to finish off because I can see the time on this. It's a long one. Oh, look at that, completeness. Huh. Interesting. I'll read it. A journey completed. That's how this video feels. A goal achieved. An era ended. The old paradigm's going. It's gone, actually. This is the last gasp of it. Acknowledge your wholeness. You are at the end of a significant era in your life. Acknowledge your hard work and feel good about energies expended. This now opens new doors and new horizons are just around the corner. You take with you all that you are and move forward into what you are becoming. So when we say this is the end, and for those who have fear around that, your happy destiny is unavoidable. Don't fear it. It's actually okay. You're just letting go of what no longer serves you. It's negative and it's harmful and it's hurtful. We need a much more sophisticated culture to arise now, which is able to deal with the problems that have been created by past generations on the planet. We have to come together as one. There is no enemy. Even when I've talked in terms of class and elite and all the rest of it, we're all one. These are just beliefs we've had. None of it's true. We're all here with gifts and talents and abilities. We are incredible. And I knew this when I was a child. I always knew we were amazing. But we let all these negative beliefs get in the way. We play all these silly games to hurt and harm and bully others. And all we're doing is hurting ourselves, because it's not who you are. You are far, far more. And everyone who's watching this to this point, know this. You are not what you do. You're not what your family think. You're not what society expects of you. You are a miracle that's come into this world to be who you are. We are all learning from one another really important lessons at this time. The upheavals that we're seeing in various parts of the world are the result of past actions that are culminating. When you disconnect from humanity, it all unravels naturally. It's not about looking for those people who are the radicals or the rebels or, the disruptors. Let's drop all that risk management language. It's irrelevant. You've done it to yourself because you moved away from what was true within you, and you know what is true because it feels good. You don't need to supplement that with wealth or status trappings or a good-looking blonde partner or good-looking man or an education to say, look at me, I'm a success. You were a success the moment you were born, and your life is successive. You cannot fail in this life. You have not failed. You can only fail to take the gold out of each experience. This is what I call the fool's gold. You're here to learn. You're going to make mistakes. You can't do it perfectly. And there's perfection in the imperfection. That's where the learning is. That's why you're here. If you knew everything, you wouldn't be here. We're here. They don't call it, it's not called a school. We're here to remember, because we already have the knowledge within when we become still enough to hear ourselves. I am no better than you. I'm just someone who's realizing what is true. So with that, I lay this gift at your feet, and I feel a great sense of love in service to you. I send you peace, I send you happiness, and I send you joy, and know that your happy destiny in truth is unavoidable. It will get better, but we have to go through what we're going through. Take care. I love you. Bye.